What's going on, everyone? In this video, we're going to be querying and integrating our own custom LLM, if you will. We're essentially going to be using our own data that we upload so we can query it with something like GPT-3 or GPT-4, whatever model you want to utilize. And we're going to be doing this actually with Bubble and another kind of no-code backend called Flowise. This has been recommended by quite a bit of people. There is a little bit of setup and configuration involved in doing this, which we're actually going to look into. But just to quickly show you guys a demo, in this example, we've uploaded the Satoshi papers. For those of you that don't know, this was essentially just released kind of anonymously in 2008, if I'm not mistaken, on kind of the idea of Bitcoin, essentially. So you can see that we've actually uploaded it here, and if we come back to Bubble, we can ask it, what is this document about and who created it? So that's going, when we click search, that's going to query it, and we should get the response below. This document's about Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system, and it was created by Satoshi Nakamoto. So obviously, guys, if this was just a language model not ingested with any other data, it wouldn't know what it is when I'm referring to this. So yeah, let's actually get into creating this. The first thing we're going to do is create the backend, and we're going to be leveraging and utilizing a framework called Langchain. So for those of you that don't know about that, essentially just think of it as kind of a tool, a framework that solves a lot of the limitations that current language models have. You can do a whole lot with it, and it abstracts it. It just makes it easier for us developers or even no-code developers to build things, build very powerful, more complex applications that are powered by language models. And I actually have a whole video dedicated to this. I'm going to leave that kind of goes step by step of the kind of high-level overview process, but essentially this allows us to upload our own data, whether it be CSV files, PDF files, whatever kind of file formats, as well as transient data. So for example, connecting this to a database or to a company CRM, you can do a whole lot. But again, in this kind of example, we're going to simply be doing it with PDF documents. So yeah, I guess there's kind of, I'll quickly kind of iterate through this, but essentially there's two arms to this whole thing, right? The document ingestion and then the search query. So basically when we upload a file, the document ingestion, we're essentially we're uploading a file like this, right? This Bitcoin papers. And although this isn't that long, it's only 9 pages. What we're basically doing is we're chunking it up. So for example, this might be one chunk. This might be another chunk. And when a user asks a question, it's going to select the relevant chunks out of this paper to use as context. So for example, if we ask something about how proof of work works, it's not going to utilize the whole PDF document. It's going to utilize just a small section of it, which I think is really, really powerful kind of when you do this at scale. So enough talking. You guys will kind of understand this process as we go through it a lot more, but you're going to want to come to the Flowise GitHub repository. And like I said, guys, this is a little bit of, there's a little bit of configuration involved in doing this. It's pretty straightforward if you guys follow this tutorial, but essentially once you're on the repo, you want to just fork it. Make sure you guys don't just clone it. You want to fork it, that way we can host it on our own server, on our own backend that we can query with Bubble. So yeah, once you guys have it forked, you're going to have you're going to pull up the repo, and again, you can read the README, and for those of you that don't know, this is just kind of a set of instructions provided by the developers that built this. But again, we don't really need to know what's kind of going on behind all of this. So really, all we need to do is just deploy this. So we can obviously deploy this on our computer locally, but if we want to access it whenever we want, we would need to deploy it on a server. So to do that, we're going to use a tool called render. And I also set it up with Vercel, if you guys are familiar with that, as far as hosting, but there was a bit of configuration that was needed to do that. But render is pretty straightforward when you deploy it. So again, guys, we're essentially just creating a something that's live on production, so we can access it whenever and whenever. Or whenever and wherever, sorry. So yeah, to do that, you want to create a render account, and then if you guys just come back to your dashboard, you want to come into new and then web service, and then connect your GitHub repository, and from this you're going to want to essentially either, because when we fork this, it's going to be on our account. That's basically, we're just kind of copying and pasting it into our account, if you will. So once that's forked, we should have access to it directly here. So we can just click connect, and then everything. As far as the runtime, we don't want to use Docker in this case. We'll use Node. Just select Node for the build command. That looks all good there. Again, you can follow the kind of the README documentation as well. But yeah, we're going to select just the free plan for now. Obviously, if you want to make this production level, you can upgrade to have more capacity. But once that's created, it's going to take about 5-10 minutes to create. But once it is, I'm not going to do it because mine's already up. Probably more closer to 10 minutes now that I think about it. But once it is, we're going to have a URL provided by us by Render that we're able to access. And this is essentially Flowise, kind of a drag and drop backend as a service. It's pretty straightforward, other than just getting all of the necessary configurations set. So let's create our chat flow to communicate with our PDF documents. So the first thing we're going to want to do is come to the chat flows, add a new one, and click this little plus icon here and select for the document loaders. Again, guys, there's quite a bit. This is, again, provided by Langchain's framework, but this no-code tool has made it very easy for us to implement this. But if we come into the we can select whatever file loader we want. There's even web loaders such as tools with Cheerio, which kind of you can simply input a URL and it would scrape a site and then ingest that data. But again, we're just going to use a PDF file loader, drag and drop it simply as that. And you can kind of see the way that Flowise is set up. It kind of accepts an input and has an output that you need to connect. So this is where we're going to actually upload our document. So in our case, it's going to be the Satoshi papers, the Bitcoin papers, but we want to actually set it up to a text splitter. So just click that little plus icon there, and back to what I was saying. I'll kind of walk you guys through the process, but click the recursive character text splitter, drag and drop it there. So this is essentially kind of like we talked about. We're going to be chunking all of that document data, right? It's in our case, it's only 9 pages, but obviously if this is something like your company data, whether it's something that's internal or customer facing, it's probably going to be a lot of pages, and we obviously want to reference only the relevant data, so we do have to chunk it, and this is what makes it so scalable. So yeah, essentially once we have that dragged and dropped, connected to, we can select the chunk size to what we want, since the Satoshi, since this what we're going to be uploading is only 9 pages. I think 1,000 is fine right here. Obviously you may want, you kind of have to play around with it, increase or decrease the chunk size. And then the overlap, this is kind of just to, if 2 chunks are kind of very similar, we can have a little bit of overlap between the two. We'll set that to 25. Again, you can kind of play around with it as you will. But as far as the actual document, once we have this PDF, chunked and split, we want to store it somewhere, right? Where are we going to store it? We're going to store it in a vector database. Now there are a lot of solutions. If you just click the you just click the plus icon there. You're going to see, if we come into the where is it, the vector stores hidden below me here, sorry, but you're gonna see we kind of have some options here. We traditionally use Supabase with this, with storing our vectorized data, but in our case we'll just use the Pinecone upsert, drag and drop that there, and you can see that this kind of accepts two parameters: the document, which is right here, and then also the embeddings. And this embeddings is handled by OpenAI. So we want to come back here and drop down in the embeddings. We're going to use the OpenAI embeddings model. So let's just go ahead and drag that there. So again, if this is kind of too much information here, all this really is doing is we're just uploading a document and we're making it readable for a computer to understand, okay, this is most similar with this. And if we kind of come back to our example, we're essentially, each one of these chunks, we're creating it into a vector, which is, like I said, just numbers that a computer can simply understand. And how does it understand it? It does it with cosine similarity. So again, check out my video on that if you kind of want a high level overview of this as far as the concepts of it. But once we have the data stored in Pinecone, think of this just as a database solution, right? Once we have all of this stored, we can now reference this our data in another chain. So in our case, we're going to if you guys come down to chains, we're just going to do I guess we can do we'll do a conversational retrieval QA chain, which is pretty standard in my opinion. Again, this just allows us our chat to be conversational, so it can take in the previous context of the conversation into context. Sorry. So grab that little icon here and then put it into the vector store retriever. Now we need an actual large language model to power all of this. So again, this is something that you can plug in your own models. There's quite a bit we can select from, but we're obviously going to use just the OpenAI model, as most of you guys are familiar with, and we can just simply drag that and drop it there. So now, this allows us to, this is really the backend functionality that Bubble is going to integrate with, right? So when we type in this query, it's going to do all of the kind of necessary work to find the relevant data in the document that we're going to upload, and then from there use that as context and provide a response. This is called a two-shot prompt response, if I'm not mistaken. But that's kind of the bulk of it. And really from here, I guess, before we actually can make any calls, we do need to add our environment variables, or all the authentications, such as our OpenAI API key, as well as our Pinecone API keys, which is pretty straightforward. Obviously, you guys know probably by now, if you're watching this, how to get your OpenAI API key, but I will walk through the Pinecone solution here. So if you guys come to Pinecone, you want to create an account, and you just want to, if we come back to indexes, you're going to want to create an index. You can call it whatever you want. We can call it, no code, whatever you want to name it. And then for the dimensions, we're going to do what OpenAI recommends for their embeddings, which is 1536 different dimensions. We'll use cosine similarity, again, that's recommended. And then for the pod type, you can select whatever. I would do P2 just because it has the lowest latency. It's quick responses. So you create the index from there. I already have mine created. It's going to take about maybe a minute or two to initialize and be ready to upsert our data. So if we come back to our Flowise, our backend application, we're going to want to add all of these configurations. And if you guys can see, obviously I've already added my OpenAI API keys, so all we need is to add our environment variables for Pinecone to get this thing working. So for the index, that's going to be the index name. Ours is called Bubble Embeddings. Call it whatever you want. And then for the environment, if you guys come back into, I guess just come back into the API keys, and then in the environment, it's going to be whatever region you're closest to, and add that environment. Let me make sure, make sure there's no white space there. And then lastly, the API key. So just come here and copy that. So if we come back, add that. And then, obviously, there is an optional namespace. So this is kind of a way to kind of segment our data, right? So obviously, if we were to build a more robust application that handled a lot of different users, we would obviously not want other users to access, other users' data. And we don't have any authentication involved in this. So again, obviously that'd be a big security risk there. It'd be relatively easy to access other users' data, which can be very sensitive. But this is kind of a way, just think of this kind of as a way to organize our data. So for example, you could have a namespace for each user that signs up with your application. And only that user can reference this specific namespace. Now in our case, we'll just call it, whatever we want. We'll just call it Satoshi Papers for now. And then, once you have that, you're basically pretty much set. You want to go ahead and save this. We'll just call it Convo Q&A chain. Save that, and then it may take a little bit to upload, so we can just simply upload our document. Sorry, make sure that you guys upload your document and then click save. And then if we actually come and click this chat icon here, let me clear my data. We can say, what is this document about? And if we click that, it may take a little bit to initialize. I think this is where it actually ingests, kind of follows this whole workflow when we actually query it. So we can see this document is about proposed solution to double spending. It gives us the response that we're obviously looking for. Now, this is cool, right? Obviously, we have a little chatbot application, but we want to kind of combine this with the power of Bubble, right? But with Bubble, you may have your own already existing application on there, whether it's a CRM or whether it's a tool internal to your team. You want to integrate this with Bubble, combine this with Bubble's functionality and make a more powerful and robust application. So to do that, we need to, if you guys have this, or you guys are going to see this little kind of code icon here, this is going to give us the API that we're going to use with Bubble to communicate with our backend. And again, APIs are just, kind of as I just mentioned, they're just tools to allow kind of two separate applications to communicate with one another. So, obviously, as we see here, all of the kind of functionalities handled on our server that we uploaded on render. So if we come into our curl, you're going to see, or really just any of these endpoints, you're going to see the endpoint it's generated for us. And again, this is kind of the name of our repo. Again, this is unique to my account, and you can see on the end here, it's given us the I guess chatbot ID. So like I said, if this was a more robust application and you had a lot of different users, for instance, each user could reference different IDs based on what they want to utilize. So you want to copy this whole curl, this endpoint, and then come back into Bubble. And if you guys go into the plugins, you want to install the API connector. It's going to be probably the first one you see here. But if you guys, once that's installed, you're going to want to add a new API. And then we don't need to access any shared headers here, but expand that, and then we can paste that same URL that Flowise provided us in here. And then make sure you guys select this as an action too. If you don't, you're not going to be able to access it within Bubble, which is kind of annoying. And then for the content type, make sure you guys have application JSON, just a formatting option vary, across all APIs you'll see. And then, you can select this as private, obviously, as we won't need to access anything. But one thing, and make sure you guys set the data type to text. I think by default it's going to be JSON format. But kind of from here, we can actually just query. We can essentially do what we did in Flowise's kind of nice little chatbot UI. We can do it in Bubble just to test that, hey, we're making the connection and it's working. So if we come into the JSON body here, we can either hard code something in there, but we obviously want this dynamically displayed. So we'll have the input here is the key, and then the value. So we can, for instance, quickly query this. And I think this might have been actually my old kind of test endpoint that I did. So let me copy this new one and then come back into Bubble and then paste that in. So in order to use it in our workflows, we do want to initialize it. So click this reinitialize call, and then we should get the response. Yeah, so we said who created Bitcoin. It's going to say Satoshi Nakamoto, which no one actually knows who that is, but you can see obviously it provides us a response there. So now we know that our Bubble application is correctly communicating with our backend that we just created. And once we have this, guys, the rest is pretty straightforward. Now that we can access this in our application, in our workflows, wherever we want. So obviously in the design, as you guys saw, this is a very, very simple kind of input search query application that I've developed. Obviously you'd want to, whatever, you'd fit this to your use case, your application, whatever it may be. But if we just click on the search button here and view the workflow search button, you can see really we're just it's only just one step involved. And I'm not sure if you guys have seen my other video of this, of the I'm doing this without a backend or another framework. You would have to essentially have all of this logic, this functionality in Bubble, which would just be a pain in the ass to do. So again, rather than obviously hard coding what we want to respond with, we would put the value of the input, which is whatever the user would type in here, and then from that we would just simply set the state of the response. So if we just click this here, we can see that we've created a custom state completion. That's a text data type, and then whatever response it gets back, it's going to set it to that. So we come back to our application, we can say please explain proof of work to me. And when we click search, it's going to hit that endpoint to our backend where all of our logic is handled, such as the querying and doing a similarity search on our data stored in our Pinecone index. And if we come back, you can see we'll get a response. Proof of work is used to implement a distributed timestamp server, yada yada yada. You guys get the rest. So yeah, you can see now how easy it is to do all of this with a framework like Langchain and a backend framework like this. Now obviously there was a bit of setup and configuration involved, and my team were actually developing a tool to simply plug and play tool that you can just sign up with and add your data. You don't have to do any of this configuration here, and we'll actually have it as workflows as well, so you won't even need to deploy it and then set up all the endpoints. You can simply have it as a workflow if you guys are interested in that. And this will actually handle authentication as well, so you can make it very robust for whatever your use case may be. So obviously if you have a lot of users, we can now segment the data kind of as we talked about with the different namespaces. All of this kind of comes ready outside the box. So if you guys are interested in that, I'm going to leave a Typeform down below. This will be a paid solution, but for the first 100 users, we're going to make this 50% off for kind of the early birds, and it's going to be a 60-day money-back guarantee. So if you guys are just interested in that, leave your email there and we'll add you to the list. But yeah, guys, I hope you enjoyed this, and yeah, I hope to continue making these style of videos, maybe adding more agent-based solutions. I can also kind of talk about our work with our clients, the use cases that we're seeing with what's working and what's not in production. So yeah, guys, in the comments, let me know any questions you may have. I'm going to try and answer all of them to the best of my ability. So yeah, definitely hope you enjoyed this, and if you guys could like and subscribe, that I'd appreciate that a lot. I'd keep making these videos. So thank you, guys.